So yeah, I'll put up a link actually with this so people can check out Marsh Brown goal. I mean, it's quite nice if you said that's probably the best goal you've seen at Wembley because you've done a lot of Wembley goal
It's one.
games since, so
It's right
it's
up
up there.
there. Yeah, it's right up
Mhm.
there. I am lucky. I've done a lot of games there, but I do particularly remember that strike. It was such a good strike. Yeah.
So playoff finals are famously very tense because of it's all on the line. You've got
Yeah.
through the season, you've got through the semis, and now you're that close. Uh, I looked again at the background to this, and I don't know if you remember this, but Forest Green had sacked their manager, a guy
Yeah.
called Pennock, the
Yeah.
week before the playoff semi. You're
That's true.
thinking
Yeah.
that's not really going to help the stability of the club. So the chap called Scott Bartlett was in temporary charge, but apparently they'd already appointed who was going to be the manager was Mark Cooper.
Yeah. He was in
But
charge really that day. Yeah.
he's they said he was on the touchline in the dugout, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking that's a little bit unfair on Scott Bartlett, who's meant to be in charge, but he's got the
Yeah.
guy who's about to take his job right behind him. That
Yeah.
sounds like Forest Green, clearly quite a small club, as you say, famously, they are, because they're based in Nailsworth, that is the smallest town to have a football league club now.
Yeah.
When they went up, I mean, I looked at it, it's only 5,500 people, which, Forest Green aren't probably the best one, and obviously they've gone down this season, but I'm sure they had more than 5,500 people at the new lawn in their days. So that's another beautiful thing about football. And
Yeah.
I've covered this many times in the podcast. As you say, Premier League is great, but it's quite glossy. Then you go to the Championship, which is a mad league, and we've had a fantastic season, and League One and League Two. And then you go down to non-league, and at the top of non-league, you've got big clubs, and amazing stories. So we obviously had Wrexham and Notts County came up last season. Wrexham got up again. We've got clubs who've been in the Football League, and then even you go further down into the sixth, seventh, eighth tier. There are great football matches, great football moments. So, as a commentator, this is something that Ali Bruce Ball touched on. He doesn't get to see that many games anymore because he's very busy commentating. Do you get to see quite a few games, or are you pretty much stuck in the commentary box and don't get a chance to actually attend as a spectator?
No, very rarely would I ever go to a game. No, I go to my kids' games. That is they're the games that I go to when I'm not commentating really. So between watching the kids and watching and doing my job, no, I don't really get to go to many games. But we're so lucky to do the job that we do, especially as I'm, essentially a football fan. So to get to go to the places that I do and to cover the levels of the game that I do, all different levels of the game. I love that. I love the variety of that. And you're right about what you say about the lower levels as well, because I think that's one of the best things about covering things like the National League is the stories that you get. Sometimes they're hard luck stories. Sometimes the players who've maybe fallen on hard times at a high level have got bad injuries or what something's happened in their life. I can remember a player whose mum was ill, for example, and he had to move away to look after her and drop down the divisions to be, to look. So everybody's got a story, haven't they, in life? And
Yeah.
we love telling those stories at that level of the game. So and the other thing I would say as well is it's kind of strange in that. Just, as I say, I cover every level of from Champions League, Premier League down to National League and things like that. And on social media, the fans who very often I'll get fans who'll repeat commentary back at me, things that I've said, or send me. In fact, I had it this morning when I woke up. Someone had sent me a video because it was a year to the day since Notts County got promoted, I think it was.
Hmm.
And someone just sent me the video and was regaling, saying that they were in tears this morning watching it back and stuff like that. But it's at that level of the game where for the supporters, it just almost what I don't know how to quite phrase this because I don't want to do down people supporters at the highest level of the game, but it's almost like they feel it even more at the lower levels of the game because
Mm.
they go through so. I mean, if you support Liverpool or Manchester United or Arsenal or whoever, you know that every so often you're going to win a trophy, you're going to have a good time, or you're going to have a day out at Wembley. I think for a lot of these clubs at the lower levels of the game, the good times are a lot less frequent, and they really
Yes.
they really embrace them even more. And it means, I mean, I had last year, I had a guy say to me, "Oh, I've got a tattoo of your what you said when Notts County got promoted and things like that." So
Wow.
it's so special at that level. And there are the people that I would say that you get the most comments on and the most reaction to the coverage too. But yeah, I just love it. I love all of it. I love all different levels of the game and the memories that it gives you. I mean, just got so many special memories of teams promotions, and it's funny because Adam Virgo always takes the mick out of me because I'll have my phone out when we're at a game, and I'll have
Mm.
my score alerts there for the different games that are going on. And my phone's constantly lighting up because I've got what I would call soft spots for so many teams now. Because once you've covered them, like going through a dramatic promotion, you can't help but retain a little interest in them. I'm not like going to watch them every week, but teams like Mansfield, where I started out, and Notts County, who had such a dramatic time with last season. Wrexham as well is another team that I look out for now. He's like, oh, you've got another soft spot, have you? So I don't know where, if I do this for another 30 years, God knows how many teams I'll be looking out for. But yeah, I do sort of really take it in very much. I really you feel a part of it when you've been part of something like that.
Absolutely right. And for example, Bromley this season, who obviously went up in the
Yeah.
National League playoff final, first time ever as a league club.
Mm.
Going to have to rip up their Astro pitch and put grass
Yeah.
in. But there are other things to savour, and you're absolutely right. Lower tier clubs don't get to taste success very often, so that's why I think it's so special. That's why they savour it, because it's not routine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've mentioned this a few times before. I'm not picking on Man City, but if you're a Man City fan in the last 10 years, you've had your cup is flowing,
Yeah.
overflowing, and I'm not sure another Premier League title means as much to City fans as Bromley getting into the Football League. In fact, I very much doubt it because it's that it's the first time Bromley have done it, and it
Just
is
means
amazing.
everything. It means
Yeah.
everything to these teams. And you can feel that when you cover the National League promotion final in particular. Again, me and Adam, we always say that when you look at the biggest games in English football, now I know people would say, well, it's not one of the biggest games in English football. There isn't as much on the line financially, but in terms of what it means and how hard it is to get that promotion, it's got to be one of the biggest games in English football every year because there's only two places for promotion from that league, and it's getting
Yeah.
it. The prestige of getting in the football league is such a big thing, particularly if you've never done it before. So you can feel it. You can feel every single year. You can feel how much it means to those fans, and I, as I say, really immerse myself in that and tap into it as a commentator because, again, to go back to what I said earlier, I think if people can tell that you're feeling it the same way that they are, it can't ever mean as much to me because I'm not a supporter of one of the teams involved, but you can still know what it means to you. You can still feel as a football fan what it means to them. And I think that's really important for good commentary is to immerse yourself in that.
Absolutely. Going back to your this first Wembley game, I don't know if you were aware of this, but playing for Mansfield that day was the player who scored the first goal in that Cambridge Mansfield game, Craig Disley.
Greg Disley, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
So
remember him
he's
from that
another
team.
guy who's following you around, a bit like Beglin and Neil. He's
Yeah.
cropping up in your life. So were
Good
you
research.
were you? Thank you. Journalist background. But when these things happen, and it may have washed over you because it's a big game, Wembley, but you suddenly think, again, there's this concurrent theme. There's a
Yeah,
little seam of I commentated on him scoring the first goal in my commentary game 13 years, a
yeah,
long time before, and then suddenly he's there and he's
yeah,
part of that team. Your first game at Wembley, and these things keep going, and it must strike you as this is part of my world, and it's going to keep coming. And I'm sure
yeah,
probably in the future you'll have things like this cropping up again and again, and it
yeah.
must be nice to have that to either comment on or at least have in the back of your mind.
Yeah, because you do keep an eye as well on players' careers and what's happened to them, particularly at the lower levels where there isn't the same level of publicity that you would have in the top levels of the game, where everybody kind of knows about all the players. But someone like Craig, I mean, I'm pretty certain he'd come through the Mansfield youth system
He did,
with
yeah.
somebody like Nathan Arnold as well, who
Mhm.
scored for Grimsby in that game. So when I was starting out, he was just breaking his way into the Mansfield team, I think. And yeah, and then as you say, my first game at Wembley, spot on. He then is involved in that team that goes up. So yeah, it is so strange the way things work, and as you're quite right, it will no doubt continue, and you almost kind of follow play as you get older, you kind of follow players' careers as well. And you think, oh my goodness, how old am I now? I remember him when he was starting out, or when the referees are younger than you as they are now. I start to think, oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, good old age passing you by. So next one we're going to concentrate is your first match abroad,
Yeah.
which again you're moving to a completely different environment, which was Dynamo Kiev against Chelsea in the Europa League. So that must have been so exciting to,
Yeah.
Wembley, obviously your first Wembley is great, but you're going abroad to
Yeah.
commentate on a game and you're getting used to an unnatural environment. And, can you remember clearly the journey and getting to the stadium? Is that something that's actually crystal clear?
Yeah, I remember so much about that because doing a game abroad had always been a massive ambition of mine. And because I'd started out on in terms of when I was working my way up the ladder as a commentator, and you do things that a lot of people would never really see, and sometimes it's just stuff that goes out abroad on. I remember covering World Feed Games, European games from lots of different countries, and nobody probably would really have seen them in this country, but that was kind of where I'd cut my teeth as a TV commentator. I'd done some club TV stuff with teams like Everton, Wigan, Portsmouth, but
Hmm.
as I moved up the ladder and did World Feed stuff, it was all European stuff, so like Ligue 1 and then Europa League type game. So I kind of really, as a TV commentator, a lot of the stuff I'd done was, as I was feeling my way up the ladder, was European football. So the prospects when I was at BT of working my way up the ladder there to the point where I got the chance to go abroad, because it was only a select few commentators there who would usually get the
Sure.
chance to go abroad. It was usually the guys who were contracted, the senior commentators. So when I got that email saying, we want you to go and do this game, that was for me. It wasn't just the excitement of going to do a game abroad, which is what I'd always wanted to do. It was a clear sign to me that they rate me and they want to further my career there. So it
Yeah.
was really positive in both respects, really, because it gave me huge confidence that they thought I was good enough to go abroad and good enough to go and cover an English club in Europe. Because that was another thing, is that I would get to do, games between two European sides, but obviously the
Yeah.
bigger audiences are on when it's the British clubs. So if you got a British clubs game, you knew that you were obviously doing okay in somebody's eyes. So it
Yeah.
meant so much to me for lots of different reasons. But yeah, it was just absolutely, it was a very long trip. I think I left on the Monday night because I had to go and stay over at, I think it was Gatwick the night before. So I left on the Monday night and it took me because it was quite a long journey to Ukraine. And I remember I came back on the Friday afternoon, so all the traveling and everything, it took nearly the whole week.
Yeah.
But it was just a fantastic experience. I mean, Chelsea hammered them. It was 5-0, as I remember.
Yeah.
It was no contest at all. The game. Olivier Giroud got a hat trick. Alonso got one. Hudson Odoi, who's at Forest now, he got one. So the game was a no contest, but I went with Nigel Spatman, who is somebody who I've done a
Mhm.
lot of games with. An absolutely brilliant guy, Nigel, such a genuine man, someone I've got a lot of respect for as well for his career in the game. And it was just a great first taste of covering European football abroad. Yeah, and the stadium as well. I mean, as a stadium geek, to walk out there, I've actually still got a video on my phone of me and Nigel walking out onto the pitch. Occasionally look back at videos like that. And I can
Mhm.
remember just being, again, a bit like the Wembley feeling, just looking around going, wow. When I was on the commentary on the gantry, I took, do you call it, it's a panoramic, isn't it? That you can do
Mhm.
on an iPhone. And I took a panoramic photo and I ended up paying quite a bit of money to get it blown up and framed. And And yeah, I've still kept that now. So that I just wanted a memento, a souvenir of my first game abroad, because it just meant a lot to me, really.
Yeah, and an amazing place to go to. As you say, it was a bit of a. It wasn't exactly a dramatic game because Chelsea were
No,
already 3-0 up from the first leg, and they
yeah,
quite, as you point out, hammered them 5-0. And actually, Giroud, it was a perfect hat trick, which
yeah.
I don't know in your commentary notes if you had this, but the previous, I had this previous perfect hat trick by a Chelsea player was Didier Drogba back in, well, I mean, probably 8 or 9 years before that. So, I mean, Giroud's an interesting character in that because that's the Europa League, and Chelsea do go on to win the Europa League, beating Arsenal 4-1 in the final. But Giroud, in that season, he hardly played in the Premier League. I checked it out. He played 7 games for Chelsea in the Premier League, scored twice. Whereas in the Europa League, he played 12 games and scored 11 and was the top scorer in the
Yeah.
competition. So Giroud basically wasn't sort of considered good enough for the first team, let's call it, because that's what you'd put in your Premier League team, wouldn't it? But he happened to be quite good in the Europa League and absolutely hammered, 11 goals in 12 games is quite good going, and including this hat trick
Yeah.
in Kiev.
Yeah, and subsequently since then, because I cover a lot of Italian football, Giroud was a key part of the Milan side that went on to win the Scudetto
Yeah,
a few years ago now, a couple of years ago, I should say. Yeah, one of the most underrated strikers of his generation, Olivier Giroud. I think this season's been his most prolific in front of goal for Milan, actually.
mm,
Yeah, just that's I can't put it any better than that, really. I do think he's grossly underrated, Giroud, in his career. If you look at his stats, and Edin Dzeko's another one to pick up another example of a player who's played in England and in Italy. Edin Dzeko put in a similar bracket, somebody who's maybe is, when you look back when his career's finished, at what he's won, the goal number of goals he's scored, his goal ratio, it's absolutely outstanding. And Giroud was brilliant that night. And if you look through that Chelsea side and you think about the players that they had and players that they would subsequently let go, particularly in the last couple of years. I mean, that
yeah,
team had someone like Rudiger was in it, Alonso, Conte, Kovacic was there, Willian was
yeah,
the captain that night. So yeah, it was amazing. We all know there's a big story to tell there as to why they had the change in the squad.
yeah,
We could spend a couple of hours talking just about that, but that just showed you the players that they had there back then.
yeah, absolutely. And here's a quiz question for you, Adam. I always like to throw a quiz question in. Which player was playing for Dynamo Kiev, who now plays in the Premier League?
Mikalenko.
Very good. Very good indeed. So yeah, he went to Everton a couple of years after this, and he must have been quite a young player when he was
Yeah.
playing in this game.
Funnily enough, I can remember being sat exactly where I'm sat now doing my prep for that game, and you speaking to you has jogged my memory that I remember reading about how he at the time was one of the most highly rated young Ukrainian players, and that there were a lot of clubs looking at him. So yeah,
Mm,
he was somebody who maybe even got noticed that night. I don't know, but yeah, he was certainly one of the most highly rated youngsters at that time in Ukraine.
mm. And going to Ukraine, and clearly things have happened since. And actually, my son-in-law is Ukrainian, so I know a lot about it from that side. That must have been. I mean, Kiev's a fantastic city. Such an experience to go there and now to reflect on that. So when you're going to games, and you're now going to a lot of games abroad, how much time do you get to actually soak in the atmosphere of a city? Because it's not just about the football; it's about the experience of going to different
Yeah.
cities. And you're going to the Bernabeu, but Madrid is a fantastic city.
Yeah.
Do you do you make an effort to I mean, apart from going into the local restaurant with Steve McManaman and getting the best service in the world, do you make sure that you just, I know you don't have much time probably, but a couple of hours just to go around and
Yeah,
actually
exactly
get a
that.
feel for the place?
Exactly that. You spot on. It is usually that is the phrase I always use when I get asked this question. You usually get a couple of hours. As a commentator, you really can almost never have prepped enough. There will all, even if you think you've prepped 24 hours a day, there will always be, it's unscripted sports. There will always be something that comes up that you think, oh, I wish I'd got a bit more on that or whatever. So you could prep almost constantly. I think you can, I've come to the conclusion that sometimes, I mean, I do take prep to the nth degree. I do a lot of prep, but I think sometimes you can fill your head a little bit too much. Sometimes you just need to just relax a little bit and enjoy it. And I think part of going abroad and why we're sent abroad is to give people who are not there the feel of the city. So I do think, again, as I've got more experience, I actually think it's a good thing to maybe have an hour off your prep and go into the city, buy the local newspaper, maybe use your phone you can take pictures of the paper with your phone and it'll translate it for you. I did that when I was in Italy recently with the Gazzetta dello Sport. Would translate that, speak to local. I love speaking to the cab drivers when I'm over there because they'll always they're very often football fans, and you'll get.
Yeah.
I remember being driven from an airport by an Inter fan, and he gave me some great. I've actually used cab drivers' lines on air and said, and I think it actually really adds to the whole thing because then people can feel that you're there and you're embracing it and you're part of the experience. So yeah, I do think it's important if you can to try and get a walk round. But sometimes the level of prep is such in a week that if you've got, sometimes you can have 3 or 4 games that you're prepping for in the same week. And I remember going to Seville, and that's a bit of a regret this season because I went to Seville. I think it was Arsenal that they were playing, and I saw nothing of Seville. All I saw, because our hotel was across the road from the ground, I walked from the hotel to the ground back, and that was all I saw of Seville because I just had so much prep that I had to do and I just couldn't spare the time. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed about that because I always wanted to go to Seville, but other places we've had a walk round like the Bernabeu, didn't see much of Madrid, but did have a good look around the stadium and what have you, and that was great. And I remember when I went with Brighton to Rome, we got to the hotel, and I'm a big fan of Italian culture, Italian football, and I said as soon as we get to Rome, we're leaving our bags, and whatever happens, we are going to the Colosseum, right? So that's exactly what we did. So just drove over there and got an Uber over there and literally had a couple of hours, walked around the Colosseum, did some photos, had a coffee and a pizza, came back, and then that was it. You're fully into work. So yeah, it is usually a couple of hours that you get.
Well, good to see you doing the classic Italian Colosseum pizza coffee. What else do you need? It's the perfect triumvirate, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just going to go back to one thing, and this is going to be probably my final question, although I might think of another one. You mentioned earlier on that when you took your kids to their first game. I don't know if it was the same one where they went. So tell me a little bit about that, because I always love the fact that you remember. Well, I don't remember your first game particularly clearly because you were only 5, but taking someone who is either your son, your daughter, whoever it might be, to their first game, I think is also a pretty special moment. So can you remember that?
Yeah, I remember taking them up the steps at. I think that, funny enough, I think that might have been because, as I say, I'm from Southport originally. My mum still lives there, so I'm trying to remember. I think we might have gone back there for a weekend, and I remember taking them. I think it might have been a Liverpool game like mine actually, but I just remember I got my camera phone, and I just had this thing in my head of I almost wanted to recreate the feeling the feeling I had when I walked up the steps. And I remember videoing them and they went up the steps, but their reaction just wasn't the same as mine, really, because they sort of like looked a bit, oh, this is cool, but they weren't like, I was expecting their mouths to be wide open, their eyes gobsmacked. And I remember thinking, oh, okay. I think it was a Legends game. That's right. Yeah, my memory's coming back now. My memory's terrible, as I said to you earlier. I'm not great for this. But yeah, I remember it was a Legends game. I think it was Real Madrid against Liverpool, I think. I'm pretty certain that's what it was, yeah. And I wonder if Steve was playing in that game. He probably was, Real Madrid against Liverpool. Yeah, it's a good number.
Yeah.
Probably about I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. Maybe a bit longer than that. But yeah, I just remember filming them walking up the steps, and then they enjoyed it. They loved it. They wanted to go back again afterwards. Had a nice day. those Legends games are great, aren't they? I don't know if I've been to quite a few of them. They're brilliant. But yeah, their reaction wasn't quite as
Yeah,
quite as wowed as I was about the pitch and everything.
but how old were they at the time?
They'd have been similar age to me. Well, my
Yeah,
youngest probably would have been similar age to me. My eldest, I would imagine, probably would have been about, well, she's 14 now, so she would have been about 7, something like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, you should have prepped them for that. You should have said, "I'm going to do a video. You've got to look absolutely amazed when you come up into the stands."
I just wanted to get that natural reaction of, seeing a pitch for the first time. Or I remember taking them to Hague Avenue as well, actually, to just to see the pitch there. And that was really nice as well to see them, stood by a pitch that I actually played on when I was a kid, because being from Southport, a lot of our kids' cup finals were on Hague, which I don't know if you know, but it's always been one of the biggest pitches in the country, and it backed onto my old college as well. So that was nice because my kids have not been brought up where I was; they've been brought up in the Nottinghamshire area. So, yeah, in fact, my youngest plays for Notts County. So,
Oh, really?
yeah. So it was really nice to take them to Southport and see, where I'm from.
Brilliant. I think that's probably enough of our journey, and what a journey it's been. You said, "Oh, you didn't remember much," but some of it's coming back now, Adam.
Yeah, it's as you've been talking. Yeah. You've jogged a
Yeah.
few memories.
Well, that's all part of my role here as a host, is to dig out the memories.
Your research is great, by the way, as well. Have you ever thought of doing commentary?
Well, what are you doing next week? No, it's a bit late in life to do. I think I've had a couple of changes of career, but I think moving into football commentary at my age would possibly be a stretch. But as I said, I love the themes and the seams of football, and I do really enjoy the fact that your first live match, Jim Beglin, Phil Neal alongside you, and then, as you say, you've had a lot of colleagues, and you've probably watched quite a few of them play, whether it's Adam Virgo or Nigel Spackman. So that is all part of being on the podcast. It started with a kick that you start and then you go off onto lots of different tributaries, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed your journey, and I
I've
know
enjoyed talking about it. It's good. I love it when you get memories brought back like that. It's great. So thank you for having me on.
it's been a pleasure, and thank you for your time.